Hello, friends. I am so excited to be here. I haven't been live in quite some time. I'm somebody who does, at least every other day. I really enjoy it, but I haven't been on YouTube for like 4 days. So I'm so happy to be back with Johanna from Johanna Reads. How are you tonight?
Hi, I am great. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So the first time we did this, I had to cancel, and I was so sad. I think the kids were sick. I'm just so happy you're here. You've been a channel that I was binging way before I even thought about like doing my own thing. There's another one here, and I knew he would be because I know he's a huge fan of yours and you a fan of his. My man,
Oh,
Philip Chase. And
yes.
I got to tell on him because I know this about him, and I don't think he'll mind. If he's up past 8 watching YouTube, he likes the guest. So he's interested in which he told me. He said, "Look, man, I like to go to bed kind of early. So if I'm up past 8, look, I like the guests. So, man, thank you for being here, Philip.
Oh,
Tori, Tori
oh,
Talks, thank you for being
Tori.
here. My
Yay.
wonderful other half, Book Mama 87. Thank you, love. Jim McCleary, Fear the Beard people. So yeah, I'm just so happy to be here. It's nice to come back. I have a lot of talking that I haven't done in a while. You start to feel that buildup of tension, and this has been one of those releases for me, talking about things that I love. So uh, Philip says,
Oh,
old people go to bed early. Man, I totally get it. I'm starting to get it more and more. We've got 4 babies over here. It's like we can't think about going to bed at 8 yet and getting up at a normal time. But man, that's awesome. Thank you for being here, Philip. Everything you do is wonderful.
oh, thank you
So
so much, Philip.
yes, and you guys just did something not too long ago. I seen that. That's wonderful. Everything you guys do together is great. So I want to kind of just start out here. So if you guys haven't seen this title before, well, that's because I don't think I've used it yet. It's kind of a new thing. Instead of like interview with a booktuber, we always kind of try to come up with a fun phrase. So it's going to be booktubers and beyond. That's when I talk to the wonderful people across Booktube. So officially, episode 1 is with Johanna. I'm so happy.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love the title, Booktube and Beyond. It's fantastic.
Yeah, kind of like a little sneak peek to why you started your channel and all that fun stuff. So, speaking of which, tell us a little bit of what inspired you to just dive in there and start this wonderful channel that you
Thank
did.
you. Thank you. Well, it's such a pleasure to have a channel here on BookTube, just the best community in the world, in my opinion. Um,
Yes.
and thank you about the bookshelves. They're coming along. I started my channel back in 2021, the very beginning of 2021, January 3rd. I started it, and the story is it was a little bit of a joke. What happened was I was active in some Discord communities, and I was watching a lot of channels at the time, like following a lot of booktubers and leaving a lot of comments. I think everybody just knew me from their comment section at the time. And then one day I noticed that on my own YouTube account, because if you comment on YouTube, you have your own channel section, but you don't really have I didn't have any videos or anything. But I noticed I had a couple of subscribers, and I thought that was the funniest thing in the world because I didn't have any videos. So I made a joke in a Discord that if I made it to the milestone of 5 subscribers, I would make a Q&A video instead of like 500 or 5,000 or whatever. And so I did my first video based on my first 5 subscribers. And I said, "Okay, well, I meant it as a joke. I didn't think I'd actually do it." But then once I saw that I got a few subscribers, I said, "Okay, well, send me your questions." And so I did the video and I thought, well, I don't know, I might take this down, but we'll just see how this goes. And it's a really bad video. It's still there. People can look it up if they want to. It's like in standard definition and my background looks pretty bad, but it was fun and I got such a thrill, I think as most of us do, just interacting with other people when you're on camera, because it's one thing to interact in the comment section when you don't have a channel, but then when you get on camera and people see you and they comment on your video for the first time, there's nothing else that feels quite like that. So, yeah, I just decided to keep
Yes.
going.
So a
Oh,
couple things.
and
Yes,
sorry.
Gavin reads it all, man. What a wonderful comment. Joanna's so powerful, she gets stuff before making videos. Look at that. Absolutely.
I have to shout out Gavin really quickly though, because I am
Yes.
halfway through watching his Lord of the Rings vlog, and it is
Ooh,
the most epic, incredible reading vlog I've ever seen in my entire life. Everybody needs to go check it out. He actually reads The Lord of the Rings in the Shire. It is the coolest video ever. I
Gavin,
just have
I
to
want
say
you to know that this is one of the biggest reasons I love talking to other booktubers because now I have something to binge, bro. I'm definitely checking that out.
gotta check it out.
100%. Yeah, dude, that's amazing. That is something I'm very much going to be into. So you said that, actually, I kind of forget my point. I hope I remember it because I feel like it was good. But you said that you started and you didn't feel a feeling like that. Oh, I was going to say, you've been in Discord. So when I started Discord, maybe like a little less than a year ago, lost is an understatement. So to have kind of figured that out and been in the space when it was first starting, I'm sure that was really cool. And not only that, to start a channel, um, you know, is somewhat of a funny thing and gain this passion that I see in your videos. It's very, very cool. And I can totally agree with you. Not much. There's not many other feelings like kind of submitting that video and then somebody saying, "Oh man, that was really cool," or it's like, "Oh, the work and passion that I put into reading and kind of paying attention and maybe taking notes paid off."
Yeah,
Story
absolutely.
talks. Juana is
So
an
sweet.
icon, absolutely. So, when did you personally? So, were you younger when you found that love for literature? I always like
Yeah,
to ask these kind of foundational
yeah.
questions because I like to compare my story with other people's stories. So, were you younger?
Oh, yeah, good question. I like this question a lot, and I'll say really quickly too about the Discord thing, just to go off that point. There's really something special about Discord, isn't there? Like, I
Yes.
it's one thing to be commenting on people's channels and interacting with people, but when I got in the Discord community, it's like this real full-on interaction, and so it was really nice to feel like I could start a channel and not totally start in the void, which I know some people do on Booktube. They start and they don't have anybody watching their videos at first, and it takes a while for them to get going. So I was just very blessed, I think, because of Discord and just having some people I could interact with there. Thank you, BellTube, by the way, for the nice comment there.
I was so Joanna basically was touching on a very similar experience that most of us booktubers had. At first, it's kind of slow. Man, what's up? BellTube didn't have that experience. Man, he just blew up. Like, come on, Bell. Come
I
on,
know.
bro. Where's
It's
the
so
talent?
true.
It is.
Some people
I
just
always
start
tease him.
off and on fire like BellTube for sure. But as far as
100%.
like the literature question, I I I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I think, yeah, I mean, my mother read to my brother and me when we were little kids. I'm one of 4 siblings, and so, it was like boy, girl, and then space, boy, girl. So my brother, who's just barely 2 years older than me, we were very close, and my mother would he actually started reading very early, but she would read to us before bedtime until we were old enough to read, and as soon as we were old enough to read, she'd have us read to her. And then I enjoyed going to the library when I was a kid and picking out different books, but I didn't really fall in love with reading, I think, until I was around 9 or 10 years old, and I was always into I talked about this a little bit in a recent conversation on my channel, but I was a big horror fan when I was a kid. I loved Freddy Krueger, and I was, like, really into Freddy Krueger. I know it was, like, totally not age appropriate, but I just had a thing for horror. I just thought horror was really interesting and fascinating, especially supernatural stuff, and when I was, in my elementary school library, my cousin at the time picked up a YA horror book. It was called Summer Fear by an author named Lois Duncan, and as soon as I saw the book and the cover, it's a very campy cover now, but at the time I thought, "Ooh, that looks scary and I wanna read that." And so I read it and I fell in love and I started to read everything that that author had ever written. And then that transitioned into, like, R.L. Stein's Fear Street books. I
Yes.
read a lot of YA horror to get into when I first got into reading, And so that was actually my entryway into reading, and it saved me. It saved me through middle school because I remember that being a really rough time in my life. I was definitely one of those kids who was bullied. So I
Oh
just
my
felt like
God.
I took refuge every weekend in my book. I would just go home and be excited to just spend all weekend reading my book. And so that's how I really got through those years. I didn't read. I was a little more off and on with reading in high school, but that was when I fell in love with fantasy books. But yeah, I would say that maybe around the age 9 or 10 was when I really fell in love with reading and found out the power of what reading could do, and also
Ooh.
related to reading just being a refuge for me.
Yeah, you touch on some important parts in your early childhood and growing up as an adolescent into a teen that reading helped you get through. And that is often the part I love to hear. Those are the little bits of gold because my parents they weren't really into reading. My mom and dad had um, not really pushed me to, I wish they would have. They were great parents, but just weren't they weren't readers themselves. So naturally, I tried to get out of everything in high school, reading wise. And I didn't find this love until and I know the people who watch me regularly are so tired of hearing it, but I was 29. I'm 33 now. But what I truly love is what I want for my children. I often hear through stories like yours. I want their imagination to be set at that younger age, because I feel like as an adult, with all these really big decisions and serious topics in our life every single day, it's something special if you can dive into a book and get immersed and find that passion. And that's something I actually had to work at a little bit. And I don't want that to be the same. I often talk. My oldest is 4, and I've grabbed the Hobbit's when I'm going to read to him first, and I'm definitely guilty of grabbing that, and I know that it's a little premature. Now I still read to him, but they're kid books, and he loves it. So I hope and pray that when I do read that Hobbit to he just gets, Dad, where's some more of this? Because that's often the experience I wished I had. So thank you for sharing that. And that's brave too, because a lot of those times that are harder for us in life, we find those things that help us get through it. And you shared that with us. So I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And that's so wonderful that you are passionate about passing that on to your children.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful to hear. That's so special too, because I was very fortunate in that my whole entire family actually, all of my siblings and my parents are avid readers, but they never pushed me or forced me either. And I'm sure that for my mom, my mother was an English teacher, and she takes a lot of pride in the fact that when she was an English teacher for her middle graders, that she would have them read Romeo and Juliet out loud because you have to consume Shakespeare out loud. She's very passionate about literature and about classics, but she was very open-minded about the fact I was into horror and that I wanted to read teenage horror. And as long as I was
I
reading, she was happy.
I so much love that because I think one of the most inspiring stories that before I had kids, this is how I felt, but especially with kids, is when my uncle was one. He let his kids do what they wanted as far as what they were into. He never suggested or pushed anything. He let them fall into those niches as they grew. I respect that very highly, because us as individuals, we have those set morals and values, and to allow your children to discover those on their own is something very special. So I love that about your mom. That's I'm sure, a very important part of that story for you. That's very
Yeah.
cool. I love that.
And it's kind of funny now because I talk to whenever I talk to my mom on the phone, we don't talk all the time, but whenever we talk about books a lot. And in fact, even though I was just talking about YA horror back then, I just finished Du Maurier's Rebecca, the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is
Yep.
something she read as a teen because it's a classic. And we just gushed about Rebecca. She hadn't read it in like 40 years maybe, but we just gushed about it for about an hour on the phone. And it's just kind of funny that I can talk about books with my mom now. But it's because of that seed being planted at a young age too. I really think that that went a long way. So It's kind of
I,
funny that we can talk about books now that we
I
probably
feel,
didn't back then.
yeah, I could feel like, so like reading a book now and then 40 years later with my child talking about them, that book as an adult, my child as an adult, I'm sure that was so special to her.
She was so
You know,
thrilled. Yeah.
oh, I bet.
Yeah, it's like
Uh,
it's just like if 40 years from now, your child says, "I read Lord of the Rings and I wanna tell you all about it," and you're just like, "I wanna talk to you about it."
yeah, it's
So,
like, look, I've got all the time in the world. Let's go.
yeah, let's
Yes.
go. Let me just turn on the camera.
So yes, exactly. So Philip touches on a couple points here, and I have to go there because I don't understand anything he's talking about here. So I need some context. Please also ask Joanna about how she fits a booktube channel into her life when she is so busy assassinating. Also, how does she hide her elf ears so well? And who is next on her list? I need some context.
Okay, well, it's my special assassin elf magic. It
Mhm.
so the whole thing
I
about
did
this
see
is
the video.
that yeah, so Philip is the one who, figured out one day, that I am an elf, and he decided that I was not just any ordinary elf, but he figured out that I was an assassin elf, and so we've just been rolling with that, and so he I was actually taking the term on very with a lot of pride, and that was before I picked up his first book, The Way of Edan, and I found out that elves yes, elves are very deadly in his book, but they're also
Oh,
very ugly and mean. So I didn't know what to make of that after he's been calling me an elf for so long. But yeah, it is a busy life being an elf and being a booktuber. Mhm.
so I love that, Philip. Thank you for throwing that out there. That makes things so funny. And yet he says she is lethal. Uh, love it. So I've already told Philip this, and I'm so excited just because all my buddies have read it. Philip, is somebody I look up to highly. He's another one of those guys that I started because of the things I seen him talking about in such a professional way. Um, but yeah, there's going to be, I think it's going to be either be April or May that I'm doing that whole trilogy, the Edan trilogy, just going to cover Philip's work. I feel like it deserves that, and I'm very excited.
Yes, I'm excited too. I still haven't finished it yet, but it is in my reading plans. I'm picking up Return to Edan. I have my next few books lined up in a row, and that one I'm planning to pick up at the end of this month. Uh, yes, I'm very excited about it, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have Philip back on the channel to talk all about it.
Oh gosh, he's such a community guy. I can definitely see him doing that.
I've been
And
teasing him well, I've been kinda joking a little bit with him and Murphy Napier because I keep seeing them everywhere on YouTube lately, and I'm like, "You 2 are in" I told Murphy, I said, "I think you and Philip are in competition with each other as far as, like, who could be on the most channels because they're just popping up
mm,
everywhere." But it's wonderful, I love it.
it
I love
is.
seeing I love seeing, the familiar faces on Booktube, so
So a wonderful sci-fi author. He wrote Lost Souls. He's asked a wonderful question. If you're into dystopian sci-fi at all, pick it up. Lost Souls. I just did a review on Fanfi Addicts. It was one of the my love for sci-fi is new.
yeah.
Did not expect it. I'm just completely enthralled in it now. But yeah, he asked a wonderful question. Any big goals that you're shooting for in 2024?
Big goals, it's funny, I did a video recently about channel update stuff and looking ahead for 2024. And I said in that video that I wasn't much of a goals type of person, which is kind of true. I never set big goals for myself. I'm more a checklist kind of person. So, for example, I do have like a list of books I would love to get through in 2024. And the way that I look at it is I celebrate what I do achieve and I don't make a big deal about what I don't achieve. But
I
that's
love
just the
that.
way I think. I've never been I don't know why, but my brain just doesn't work well with, like, big overarching goals. I get lost in the minutia of what do I have to do to achieve
Ooh,
this? But that is something I definitely wanna do is just, like, I wanna read more sci-fi, actually. I have a bunch of sci-fi books that are lined up that I wanna get into because I I wouldn't say
any,
for me, my sci-fi love is new. Like, for example, I love Dune, and I've loved Dune for a
ooh,
long time, but I, for whatever reason, never prioritize it. I always end up gravitating more towards fantasy. But as of last year, towards the end of last year, I kept picking up sci-fi and kept loving sci-fi more and more. And so there are several sci-fi books I want to get through,
Have you picked
and
up
several
Christopher
series.
Rocchio?
I haven't yet, but I think what I wanna do is I think I wanna tackle Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun, which I
Wow,
know
that's
is super ambitious and scary and intimidating, but I understand there are so many references from Book of the New Sun in Bracchio's books that I feel like I would probably be a I don't know, I just feel like I would be more attuned to what he's doing in those books. I don't know, I
sure.
know it's not necessary, but it's something I kinda wanna do.
No, it's definitely on my TV, and I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was so curious because
Sure.
Christopher Rocchio was a love. I just I found Empire of Silence in this like this maybe a little bit of a reading slump, and I said,
Mhm.
"Oh my goodness, what is this?"
Yeah.
And anybody who knows his prose, it's not for the beginning sci-fi. It's very dense. It's not a quick read. You have to digest a lot of this, and man, I have to say it was a wonderful surprise, and I'm very excited that there's so many books of the Sun Eater series.
Yeah. I mean, I can believe it because I know that a few years ago, I tried listening to the audiobook of Empire of Silence, and I couldn't get through the first couple of chapters. I just kept getting lost. I was like, "No,
Yeah,
there's no way I could do this via audio. I need to get a
yeah.
book." And unfortunately, it's impossible to get a physical book right now.
Ugh.
Impossible.
Can,
I
can I
looked. Yeah, it's
can I
impossible.
brag?
Yes, go ahead.
I don't usually brag, but I'm going to. So I reached out to Christopher Rocchio I hadn't even seen Daniel Green's review yet, and I just knew that I wanted to talk to him. I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, I'm having you on the channel. Is there any chance I could buy a signed copy for you?" He's like, "Look, I'm just going to send it to you." Happens that was the last printed copy that he had gotten from his publisher, and then that shortage went on. Now I hear that they're coming back into print next week.
Oh. Oh,
Uh,
wow. I gotta jump on
yeah,
that because it's
yeah.
ridiculous. Like, it is ridiculous how hard it is to find a copy of Empire of Silence right now.
There's an eBay listing I keep looking at because I love the hardcover UKs, which is I'm sure are very pretty rare. It's like more than I'll ever spend on books, but it's so beautiful just to look at. Yeah, thank you for going over those goals, and I like that you're a checklist person because I find the same thing. If I put too many of those, I hate to say just regular goals, but like those ones that particularly put the weight on my shoulder that may take the interest out of or the fun out of what I'm doing here. I have a similar situation going on with me. So checking lists, doing what I'm able to, being honest with people as far as reviews. That is kind of where I'm at too. So I like that you shared that. Um, you touched on it a little bit, but who are some foundational authors for you? Who are some that just kind of drove that love home for you as far as a reader?
Ah, yes. Oh, that's such a good question. Because I feel like, I mean, I did mention, of course, Lois Duncan, and I think that I was asked earlier in the chat. Gavin asked earlier in the chat if that was the same author as I Know What You Did Last Summer, and that is the same author. And I did read that
Oh,
book.
I
I do own
totally
that
missed
book.
that.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah, so that would probably be one of my. I mean, I guess that would be a foundational author from when I was a kid. I mean, I don't read that genre anymore, but I did love those books at the time. I would say what else would be a foundational? I mean, I guess my love of fantasy really goes to The Hobbit and
Oh,
Lord of the
yes.
Rings. And I'm trying to think of what else, because I had various phases in my life where I would get very deeply into books and then I'd kind of fade out and get into other hobbies because I've always been somebody who's done a lot of different things. So I know that Dune was very a foundational book for me too. Um,
Now, did
Trying
you
to think
go
about
past book one?
I read the first 3. I've read, yeah, Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. And I do wanna read God Emperor of Dune at some point, especially because it just looks so fun and weird, but I really felt satisfied with the 3rd book as a complete arc of those books.
Oh,
It felt like a
wow.
complete arc for me, and that was my trouble with reading Dune because 'cause I've read it twice, and the first time I read Dune, at the time I was told, don't read past the first book because they're terrible. Somebody told me that. They scared me off of trying any of the sequels. So I only read the first book at the time. And when I read the first book at the time, I remember thinking, I think this is my favorite book of all time, except the ending just left me feeling unsatisfied. I just felt like I needed more story. Even though I know that the first Dune was originally intended as a standalone, it still just didn't have the ending I wanted. And then, so I reread Dune a few years ago, and then I read Dune Messiah, which I understand to be a bridge book between Dune and the third book, Children of Dune. And I really
Mm.
loved Dune Messiah. I feel like if you don't a lot of people talk about how it helps you to understand Dune a little bit better, which I would agree with. And then Children of Dune I loved Children of Dune. I thought it was fantastic. So when I finished Children of Dune, I did feel like it made me love the first Dune even more. It's still my favorite of the three, but it felt like it completed a story for me, completed an arc. It gave me the satisfaction I wanted at the end of Dune. So yeah, I loved those three books.
I'm so happy to hear that because again, I've had that similar experience where people are like, read the first one. But me, I just don't like just suggesting or just because we're all it's so subjective. And I have a hard time going into Dune and then just assuming I can't go into the rest because that's somebody's opinion. So I like that you took that as maybe like a little bit of a challenge. And I love also that you said that you enjoyed though. So I think that's what I'm going to do. That's been one of the reasons I haven't read Dune. Now I have watched the newest movie and I really liked it. But I want to see that experience through Frank Herbert and his prose. I'm really excited.
I hope
And
you
some,
enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it. Yeah.
well, I'll tell you what, when I read it, I'm going to send you a message and let you know what I think of it.
Please
And
do. Please do. Yeah. Um, what
Matt
was it?
Jones, oh, go
Oh,
ahead. Sorry. I'm
no,
so
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say Matt Jones. He's a wonderful author. He wrote The Shepherd, and I just got his newest book in the mail, Night of Crows. Man, I just absolutely love his writing. But he says Dune is great work. Haven't read the third, so you're on your way to the same journey that I want to have.
Yeah. But yeah, and back to the foundational authors part, I just remember I think Tolkien was the first author in which I remember rereading certain sentences and thinking, that is so beautiful. How did he do that? So that was the first author where I can remember actually appreciating prose. But other authors, I did read some Elric when I was
Mm.
a teenager as well. I read, I guess, what was popular at the time among my friends. So I read some David Eddings and Piers Anthony. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to know about what was foundational, but it's kind of funny because I enjoyed Elric at the time, and nowadays I've enjoyed Elric recently. I reread some Elric, but nowadays, I feel like I'm labeled as reading a lot of dark books,
Mhm.
like a lot of, darker fantasy, and I wonder if maybe that was somewhat foundational or somewhat influential in some way without me realizing it.
Well,
Hard to know.
it kind of plays into the next question because I know this has been hard not to talk about. Uh, because if I know your channel, this is something that you've influenced me a lot and has me very excited to dive into this particular series. Anyone who watches you knows that your favorite all time series is
Malazan Book of the Fallen, probably it is in
yes.
competition with one other series, I'll just say that,
Ooh,
but
what
I'm
is
gonna be Whoa, did you do that?
no?
How did that
Do you have a
happen?
MacBook?
I do, but how did it
Okay,
do that?
so it's something with the Mac iOS software that you use. It's like a hand gesture that you make. The identity. Yes, I think it might do,
How
or
to make
like
it
do a heart.
happen.
Try a heart.
Oh,
There it
wow. I
is.
didn't know
Yeah,
it did it with hand gestures. Like, I
yeah.
know how to do it if I click on a certain button, but I didn't know it did it with hand gestures. That is so
I didn't either.
cool.
I just found that out. I'm like, why doesn't
Oh,
mine do that?
wow.
And it's because I have a PC.
That's so
Super
funny.
cool.
That is the perfect timing too. Yeah, so as far as, Malazan Book of the Fallen though, yes, Malazan it did, it made the fireworks go out. That was kind of perfect. Oh, yes. So Malazan, what do you wanna know?
Oh yeah. So what was it about that series? particularly that captured your love, like that has you in competition, or was at one point your favorite of all time? And what sets it apart?
Oh gosh. So the thing with Malazan is I picked up the first book, Gardens of the Moon, before I had a channel. It was a few years before I had a channel and before I saw any content on BookTube about it. I remember looking up Gardens of the Moon, couldn't find much. But the reason I picked it up actually was due to my husband. He was looking up a top 100 fantasy series of all time list on the internet, just random lists on the internet about the best fantasy. So he found out about the series. He found out about Gardens of the Moon. We went into a used bookstore and he found an old used copy of Gardens of the Moon, which I have up there on the bookshelf and it's all broken and everything. I need to get a new copy of that book. And I don't know, I ended up picking up the book because he had it. I was intrigued. He ended up picking it up on ebook. So we kind of read it alongside each other, sort of. But I loved it. I remember being surprised how drawn into the story I was. It was just different. There was something that was just different than anything I'd read before. But I just remember, I don't know, I can't really describe it. There was something about reading that book that made me just want to stop and be still and just take in the story, take in the words. But I also loved Erickson's imagination. He does some really wild, cool things with magic, and he also has some quirky humor, quirky character names. I enjoyed it. I just remember really, really loving it, and I loved the female representation in that book, which was something that
Yes.
I never felt like I got a lot out of when it came to adult fantasy at the time. He has some excellent, like, at least 3, I wanna say 3 or 2 or 3, maybe 2. No, 3. 3 strong female characters that immediately come to mind for Gardens of the Moon. And so, yeah, that was what got me hooked in. I read the first book and I didn't know a single thing about the series at the time. I didn't know it was a 10-book series. I didn't know anything. So, I went into book 2 a few months later and I was completely thrown off by the fact that there was a whole new cast of characters. There were some
Yeah.
characters that crossed over, but there were so many new characters. We're on a new continent. And the pacing, the story structure, everything was so different in book 2. It was a little bit harder for me to get into, I'll be honest. I know most people fall in love with the series in book 2. For me, book 1 was where I fell in love, and then book 2 was a bit of an adjustment, and I did love the end, but it was not an easy read for me, and I took some time after book 2, wasn't sure if the series was something I wanted to continue or not, and then I saw an interview with Steven Erikson, and I saw my friend Andy do a video about the series, explaining some things about the series that I didn't quite know, and that sold me. I just
Ooh.
knew I had to continue the series from there on. And that was around the time I started my channel. I read Memories of Ice, the 3rd book, right before I started my channel. And then from then on, the first year of my channel, I didn't really have a lot of books read that year because I decided I was just going to mostly focus and prioritize Malaz and Book of the Fallen. And it was an investment of time and energy and emotions because it's an emotional series, but it was so well worth it. It felt like climbing a huge mountain and enjoying the view at the top, but also enjoying several views throughout the journey. It was just an amazing experience. And to this day, I still love hearing people talk about the series. I love hearing new readers come to the series, hearing what different people get out of it because there's so much to absorb. So it's a
Mhm.
very special series for me for sure.
So there's two people who come to my mind instantly. There's more, but instantly it's Matt's fantasy book reviews and you when it comes to loving Malazan or Malazan, however you say it. And I'll tell you, just to be 100% frank, I've made it through about a quarter of Gardens of the Moon, and it was when I was fresh, right into fantasy. Very intimidating if you're just starting to understand prose and read fantasy. I'll tell you, the audiobook is outstanding. I don't know the guy's name, but he does these voices with a depth that's it's hard to beat. But I will say that I love the female representation because there's some really badass women that are
Mhm.
like they don't take no shit. Pardon my language.
It's true.
They just don't. And as far as I made it, what I've understood, because I was just intimidated, that's why I stopped. There was no huge reason. I was enjoying it. But it's going to make a comeback this year. And I'm very excited because I like a book that challenges me. That's what Christopher Rocchio brought to the table. His prose challenges me. It does. It's not something I can just breeze through. And if you can, like, if people can breeze through Christopher Rocchio's prose or Erickson's prose, like, that's amazing. But that's just not me. I have to sit and kind of digest these themes and make sure I understand what's going on. Because if I go too far, I will I don't DNF a lot of books, but if I'm lost, it just kind of says stop. So very excited. I love hearing what you love about that, because one of the things is the epicness, the scale of Malazan. So I'm really looking forward to that, because that's what I love in the sci-fi fantasy realm that Christopher Rocchio has created. So to find that dark fantasy, which is where my love started, John Gwynne, Empire of the Vampire, just also James Rollins. He's got a couple fantasy, but James Clemens, he wrote as a fantasy author first. So it's seated in that love for dark fantasy. I'm very excited. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. If you like dark fantasy, have you ever tried Baker?
Baker.
The
No, I don't think
darkness
so.
that comes before?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
I have
you
to
need to write that down. Yes, you do. I think that would be down your alley, especially if you, well, and I know it's
R. Scott
influenced.
Baker.
R. Scott Baker, yeah.
I'm so glad you asked. I've made it through that first book. I did, but I understand nothing. I loved his prose, but I want to go back through it because I know there's a bunch of them. It's funny because that was, for some reason, even before I picked up Gardens of the Moon, I was like on Pango Books or something, and I picked it up just randomly. Obviously, not the first book I should have picked up. Very dense. But I did. I really enjoyed it, and I'm excited to get it back and try it again. What do you love about that series?
About Baker's series?
Mhm.
Yeah, about the Prince of Nothing trilogy. It
Yeah.
is very bleak, and I don't recommend it to everyone. I always tell people heavy trigger warnings.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand his intent behind why he does some of the things he
And
does.
he's got lots of videos.
Oh, does he? Yeah, you guys see, I have seen one of them. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's a lot there, but I don't know. This is gonna make me sound like I don't wanna I feel kind of shy saying this, like, or, awkward saying this, because I always feel like it makes me sound like, I don't wanna sound um, like I think I'm smart or something, but I guess
Well,
I do honestly enjoy philosophical books. I don't know why.
yes,
I don't
he
know
is.
why. I'm not an expert on philosophy by any means, but I do love, like you said, being challenged by certain ideas. I love thinking, and but it's not just that, I love feeling things too, and I think that his prose is just beautiful, and I think he has a way of just adding this depth to the world. I think that was something that stood out to me about his first book, is it felt like lived in. It felt like a real world to me, like this could really exist. And the characters felt so in depth too. But I do love the ideas that he explores, especially, and I think this is part of what I love about darker fantasy too. It might have to do with those questions about agency. Like, how much free
Mm,
will do we have in the world? I feel like a lot of dark fantasy touches on that question, and I think it's a question that is important, and
yeah.
something that, as somebody who struggles with an existential crisis now and then, that I just enjoy exploring those questions sometimes. And so I just enjoy that, especially if it can do it all. And it doesn't feel like it's trying to be edgy for the sake of being edgy. I feel like the darkness has a purpose or a gravitas behind it. There's something about the way Baker does that I feel like sets him apart from most other authors. I mean, I would say the same about Erickson, but Erickson does not consider himself a grimdark author, and I think that that's very fair to say. And I love Erickson for different reasons, but yeah, I really enjoy those questions. I love questions that challenge me. I love having my certainty challenged about things.
The most humanity that I saw in Baker's prose was, I don't remember her name, but she was essentially a hooker. She was a whore.
Yes. Mhm.
And she brought so much humanity to this story.
Esminette,
And
yes.
Esminette, yes, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, that brings back memories because it was like literally one of the first fantasy books I ever read. And you know, you hear this about this character and you're like, oh, how positive could that be? But what she does, or what Baker does through her character and her relationship with other characters, oh my gosh, it makes me want to start reading that book again right now because there's nothing more human than struggle.
I'm
It-
so glad that you see that, that you understand that. That's where I feel hesitant to recommend the series because I think some readers misunderstand his intent with that character, and they misunderstand what he's trying to do. But if you look at for me, when I read that character, I really felt like Baker was trying to put himself in the shoes of this character, of this woman, and what life was like for her in this bleak patriarchal world, and I got it. I felt it. I yeah, and I
yeah,
just like what you're saying. There's so much there.
I think the part where I lost it, not as far as like how much I enjoyed his prose, was the story was too complex during that fourth quarter of the book for me as a reader, because it challenged me to a point where I didn't know where to start again. I kind of went back, but I think as an experienced reader now, I'll go back and have a much better experience with that. But that first three quarters of the book, yeah, it was definitely an experience, and I love that you had that similar experience too, because um, he has these videos where he talks about certain people emailing him like being misogynistic, and
Yeah.
he doesn't seem that way through a book at all. Like, he portrays these deep themes in the most human way, and I really I'm really glad that you brought him up because I need to get those back, and because I sold them, and I need to kind of study those because that's kind of I think he has a lot to offer.
Yeah, I think
And
so too. I think authors like that, I have so much respect for because they are bringing a certain critical lens to fantasy and to certain parts of our world without actually virtue signaling in the text. And that's why so many people miss it when they read it. And like, for example, I got a comment once that said, well, women are just like, that's the natural order of the world. In the world, women are naturally inferior. And I said, no,
oh,
that's not what Baker
somebody
is
said that.
doing. Yeah, somebody said that. And I'm like, no, you misunderstand. So I mean, I
Wow.
think some people can miss things like that. And I do feel like it does make me wonder sometimes if that's why some authors feel the need to make sure that they're like there are some modern authors I know who are of the belief that they need to make their themes very explicit because they don't want their readers to misunderstand it. And it's kind of sad to me because I think it's extremely nuanced, but like you said, he explains this in his lectures. He explains this,
Through the
but it's
experience of
something
that
that
character.
yeah, I mean, I feel like I understood it reading it, but I guess I can understand how some people might misunderstand that, and I mean, we
Yeah.
all misunderstand things sometimes. I don't wanna say that I'm all knowing about anything. I'm sure there are things I misread all the time, but
You literally have never come across that way, not one single time.
oh,
Oh my
thank you.
goodness. Yeah,
Well, I
no,
try my best. I try my best, but yeah, it's a very nuanced, exploration of those themes, I would say. Yeah.
it is. And I think that anybody that may, like, if you're listening, if you've had issues with that book particular, that series, he has these lectures that he's done with people that he kind of goes into his purpose and the philosophy behind that. So that is out there if you deem it necessary to get a little bit of evidence, and I think that you would benefit from it.
Yeah, and some metaphysical stuff too, which is really wild. It gets even more wild by book 3, and I know
Ooh,
that Philip and I are planning to read on in this series because there's the Aspect Emperor series after that,
yeah,
and I'm very much looking forward to it, though I know it's going to be
I
dark.
have I have the judging eye up there. Like
Yes,
that's the
that's the
only book
one.
that I
Mhm.
have. So it's like that's not a starting spot. I don't know why that's like the only book I have left. I had the first three and lost interest in it, and now that it's kind of creeped back, I wish I wouldn't have sold them, but I still have
Oh,
that one. I'll keep that
you
one.
shouldn't have sold them because it's so hard to get
They
those
are.
books
They were
nowadays.
hardcovers too. They were beautiful hardcovers. I
That's
know,
even
dude.
harder.
Yeah,
Oh.
I know. I sold it for a decent price, but I wish I wouldn't have now. But that's part of being a rookie, right? Um, so I'm excited to dip back into that. I'm glad you brought that up. So what are some reads on your TBR that you're particularly excited about this year?
Yeah, so you had on Janny Wirtz
Mm,
recently, the wonderful Janny Wirtz.
such a good interview.
Oh, she's fantastic, isn't she? She's just a
Uh,
wealth of knowledge and
unapologetically
experience.
Jenny.
Oh, I know. It's so true. So I have her book, I guess it would be book 5. Try to think of the name. Why is it escaping me?
Is it the
On my
standalone?
shoulder. Grand Conspiracy. Grand
Oh, okay.
Conspiracy is on my TBR. So that's gonna be the next I think okay, so I have a couple of books on my plate right now. So, right now I'm reading The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. That's my current read.
Ooh,
It's taking me a while, but I'm gonna get through this and have a discussion with Fantasy Awash, who already blew ahead of me really fast. She finished it a few days ago. And so I'm just kind of taking my time through that. And then after that, I want to try and pick up Tori's book at some point this month, The Bloodstones.
that's
And
good.
I will also be picking up that book, The Grand Conspiracy by Janny Wirtz, and Philip's book after that, Return to Eden, as well as a book called In Ascension, which is a literary sci-fi book that I'm buddy reading with Jimmy and Murphy. So yeah, a lot of books on the plate, but
Yeah,
very much looking forward to all of them.
it's exciting. And I always tell people it's like one of my favorite things in talking to anybody is like those new obsessions I can create. So I find it particularly exciting when I hear of things like Malazan or, well, the most current one that I just got, actually, I have to throw it up here, was I've heard so much about it and really didn't have any idea how to take it. And now that I've started, I get it and I'm loving it. Piranesi.
Oh, it's one of my favorites. I
It's
love
like,
that book.
I
Love
didn't
it.
read the blurb. Bell too, Brian Bell. Tony's like, don't read the blurb, just go into it,
Yeah.
just unaware of anything. And I'm so glad I did. What an imagination
Oh,
this
she's
woman
incredible.
has.
She is
So
amazing. Yeah.
now I have to read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
Same. Same. I
So
own it now too. I just got it at a used bookstore a few weeks ago. So I own it. I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but Peter Nazy, one of my favorite standalones of all time. Absolutely incredible book. My husband just read it a couple of months ago,
uh,
not even that long ago. He read it in December, and it was so much fun to talk about it with him because he had some
oh
insights that I didn't have, and just hearing his thoughts, and then he read a passage again from that book, and it just brought me to tears all over again. That book actually was surprisingly emotional for me too, but it's just a
yeah,
beautiful book.
I'm
Mm.
a quarter way through and I have caught so many deep, like there's deep themes and then there's like Susanna Clark deep themes that are just I'm loving it. It's one that I'm again digesting. But I think it's also one that I think I should go through fairly quicker than the others before I forget any nuances or any of the descriptions. So I'm excited to finish that one. Another one that I'm very excited about that I have to share. I've started it, and this will be my next read after the next one I'll tell you about. Dreams of the
Oh,
Dying.
yeah, yeah. I've heard
This
of that
dude,
book. Yeah, I've heard
he,
great things about that book.
I kind of just discovered it, and I reached out to him, and he was lovely enough to say he's a German guy. I'm gonna have him on the channel eventually when we can line up some timing. But so far, it's like that perfect mix of like mental illness, kind of just like discovering that and kind of journeying through mental illness with that psychological horror and fantasy. It really is like a trifecta of all the things that I love. Um, excited about that. What I'm reading right now, though, that I have to just say, this is my very first sword and sorcery. And let me just tell you, it's like sci-fi. I never thought that I would be into it. And I'm just having not only has it excited me as a reader, but as a writer more so. It's Howard Andrew Jones' Lord of a Shattered Land. And I know that he was inspired a lot by like reading Conan as a kid, but it's fast-paced fantasy. I'm just really enjoying it, and I can't wait to kind of talk about it during my review.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds fun. That sounds fun.
Philip, yes, I'm so glad you said it. Dreams of the Dying tackles depression head on. I had a chat with Nicholas Zell a while back. Oh my gosh, I have to watch that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it
That's
sounds like it.
amazing.
I've heard a lot of people really appreciate the mental health representation in that book.
So I'm digging that. Yeah, so there's what I'm looking forward to a lot. There's a bunch of others, of course. We'd be on here for 5.5 hours if I was talk about all of them.
Those are some exciting reading plans, though. Nice variety too.
So if I love this question because I always like the answers. If you could sit down and have a coffee with any author, who would it be?
Oh, wow. A coffee with any author. Gosh, I don't.
If you could just pick their brain, just like, hey, I'm going to pick your brain for about an hour. We're going to sit down and have coffee.
I had breakfast with Steven Erikson.
No way, you did?
Well, with Philip and with Jimmy and Alan. Yeah, it was like a couple years ago. So I'm like, I don't know. Should I pick him again? I guess I could pick him again. But I would also love to hang out with Jenny Wirtz sometime. She and I have messaged each other on Twitter quite a bit.
So that's something I had no clue. So you guys went to breakfast?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It was a wild event. It's on Philip's channel. So you can see it there.
Me starting it. So guys, oh my gosh, I am so excited to dip back into some history because I had no clue.
Yeah.
That was amazing. So,
it was a pretty wild experience. It was a pretty wild experience.
Canada?
Yeah, it was for this thing called ICFA, which happened in Orlando. So it was in Orlando, Florida. But it was pretty surreal because I had just not long before finished Malazan Book of the Fallen, and I was reading his book, The God Is Not Willing at the time. And there was something surreal about meeting Steven Erikson in person just because when you read 10 big books by somebody, you feel like you're just in this zone and you're in this part of their mind. I don't know how to explain it. It feels like you're merging with them in some weird way. I feel that way when I'm reading a book. I don't know. That sounds kind of weird. But I just
No,
it felt surreal to me. It just felt surreal to me because I was so emotional reading Malazan and I was so immersed reading Malazan. And then it's like, you're the person who created this whole world I've been absorbed in for a year, so
yeah,
it was wild. It was a bit surreal for me.
My answer, like at this point, would be Joe Abercrombie, just because that's like I laugh at his jokes. Like he has the funniest little witty, sarcastic one-liners, and then he does characters in a way that I hope I can maybe one day do. And then some people complain about his plot or the lack of. I think it's just the perfect blend. Like I can totally see the plot. The plot is that life sucks sometimes, and you have friends, and like other people have friends, and some of those friends are torturers, and they're interesting, and they misunderstand things, and it's really wonderful. So that's who I would pick. So I think it's so cool. By the way, I just have to say I had no clue that you had breakfast with the one and only Steve Erikson. That is
It was
amazing.
so weird. It was so surreal. It was amazing though. So with Abercrombie, I think it'd be fantastic if you got him on your channel.
I would love that. I've reached out to him a couple times, and he's probably the busiest guy ever. But mark my words, he will be on my channel one day.
Yes. And have you read all of the first law books? Have you read The Age of Madness?
So I'm halfway through Before They're Hanged. I'm really still new.
Oh, it's so good. Before They Were Hanged is the book that made me fall in love with Abercrombie. I love that book. But I have to say that, well, people are just wrong about the plot stuff because there is a plot in the First Law
Yeah.
trilogy. It's just that it's spread out over 3 books, but it's there. And then with the Age of Madness, you will see it totally transform. Like it feels very, very, very plot driven, but also incredibly funny, amazing humor, fantastic themes. For me, Age of Madness is where it's at. That's my favorite. That's one of my favorite series now of all time. But
So
Abercrombie is up there as one of the best. Absolutely.
so Age of Madness starts those like standalones, right? Those like three, are they standalones?
So it's the First Law trilogy is what you're reading, right? So that's The Blade itself before they were hanged, The Last Argument of Kings. Then
Mhm.
after that, there are 3 standalones, and they're called standalones, but really you should read them in order, and you
Yeah.
really should read them after the first trilogy. So there's Best Served Cold, and then there is The Heroes, and then there's Red Country. Red Country is like his Western version of the First Law world. Then it's the Age of Madness trilogy. Age of
Ooh.
Madness is A Little Hatred, The Trouble with Peace, and Wisdom of Crowds. That trilogy is the best of the best, la creme de la creme when it comes to Abercrombie. It's Abercrombie at his finest. It's next level. To me, it was next level for character work, for plot, for themes, for everything. It just was
Mm.
absolutely the most delightful ride. I was watching somebody gush about it this morning and thought, I just want to reread Age of Madness. I actually kind of just want to drop everything and reread Age of Madness right now. It's
Oh my
so
gosh.
good. I need to
So
read The Sharp End. I haven't read that. That's the only one I haven't read in the First Law world.
so that being my answer, the guy that I would talk to after a book and a half, oh my goodness, I can't imagine after I've read what you've read.
Ah,
This
just
is
keep
this
going. It gets better and better and better. Yeah.
how brilliant is Galactus' character? So I have to say there's one point, and this is just me reading that first book and a half. Galacta grew from like a great character to the best. So Captain West goes and visits Galacta at the end of the Blade itself, and he's like, Galacta's like, man, you never came and visited me. I got injured, and he finds out that his mother, Galacta's mother, turned him away. And that was the point where I loved Abercrombie because all of a sudden Galacta has feelings, right? He's this human character, and you don't see much human in him through most of the book. And then he's like sad that his buddy didn't come to check on him. That's where Abercrombie was like, okay, this is a guy that I cannot wait to continue reading. So I'm very excited. Thank you for sharing that.
Man, maybe I'll just take your answer. I'll go have a coffee with Abercrombie. I just
There you
don't feel
go.
like I would he's just so funny though. Man. He's
His
so
his
funny. He's so
his
good.
wife has an Instagram and she's pretty cool too. Like she does fun stuff. I feel like she writes too.
Yeah. Yeah, she does. I saw that on Twitter. I saw her on Twitter for that. Yeah,
So
amazing
I'm gonna
author.
tell him. I say, look, there's people who want you on the Beard of Darkness, Joe. You just got to come
Do
through.
it.
We got to talk
Yes,
some characters. So
absolutely.
that's a
Yeah.
very big goal of my channel. So that would be
That would
so
be
cool.
so cool. Yeah. I do love hearing what authors I love hearing about writing and the process of writing. And it's
Yes.
funny because I don't have any interest in being a fantasy writer, like none whatsoever.
Mhm.
But actually, thanks to Tori from Tori Talks, she's the one who taught me that I guess I am a writer though, because I do journal. I love to write in my journal, but I just don't like to write fiction, which I guess it is kind of fiction, but, not that kind of fiction. But
No, I get it.
I love hearing about the writing process. I just think it's fun.
I think some authors get annoyed at me because I focus on the process so much. Like everybody's is completely different, even if they're somewhat similar. Like everybody, and I'm in that process of finding my process. So, um, yeah, I hit that point home quite a bit when I'm talking with an author, and you know, if my questions, I don't think I've annoyed anybody too much, but I also love hearing what did it take to get you to find that? Because to write a book, if you've ever tried to like really take it seriously, is a big process. Like keeping everything cohesive, everything with continuity and characters on their arcs, and and their motivations lining up with the plot. It's like it is a big undertaking. So as much as I can learn from somebody, I'm going to try. So I love that you brought that up. Who are a few people you'd recommend I chat with in the future? And like when I ask this, it doesn't have to be authors or editors, anybody. Like kind of just push me towards that knowledge that I'm after.
So people to chat with in the future? Is that
Yeah.
what you're asking? I
Yep.
think you're gonna have one of my friends on soon, Matt on Books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
He told me that he was gonna be coming on your channel, so I would highly recommend him as well as my other friend, Josh from Red Fury Books. Have to shout both of them
Oh,
out since I have a
yes.
Discord. I now have a Discord with those guys, so both of them are great, and I think you'd enjoy talking with both of them because I know that Matt on Books loves to talk about Malazan, so you
Mm.
got a Malazan fan there, and then Josh also loves to talk about Abercrombie. He also is a big Abercrombie fan.
And he's went many times to Japan where I would love to go.
I went there
Like,
once. It was so much
oh my
fun.
gosh,
Yes, it's so
that would be
fun.
amazing.
I felt so blessed because I got to go there before 2020. So I don't know what it's like now, but I know when I went, which was I think in 2017
Mm.
when I went, 2017, 2018, maybe it was 2018. My husband and I went to Japan and we had a blast. We had so much fun.
One of the most beautiful countries. Like
It really is.
I've just seen just these pictures that and my cousin goes and he's like a game designer or something along those lines. There he is, Matt's Fantasy Books. I thought I cornered the Matt Loves Malazan niche, but apparently we were just talking. I said, Matt, if you didn't hear, I said there's two people who come to mind when I hear Malazan, and that's you and
Me.
Johanna. Yeah,
Gotta include we gotta include Philip though, because Philip
and
also
self-centered too because he
and
loves Malazan.
self-centered, but we have to include Philip Chase too, because Philip is the one who famously said in his top 10 video a couple years ago that whereas Tolkien baptized my imagination, Erickson set it free. Something
Uh,
like that. It should be on a bumper sticker, but
that's something Dr. Fantasy would say. Come on
it is,
now.
isn't it?
Oh.
It really does need
So
to be on a bumper sticker.
this is a special moment, real quick. I have to say, Joanna, Matt, self-centered, and Philip. Look, we've got the
Woo! Go
Malazan
Malazan team.
team up in here, guys.
Absolutely.
Oh
Bridge
man, I'll tell
burners,
you
bone hunters, all the way.
exactly. Gosh, I
Yeah.
love that you guys are here. I love that so much. So the people who you told me to speak with, Josh, his YouTube channel has just exploded. I love to see that because when I go to his channel, it's like I know I'm going to learn something. And Matt, I say Matt on Books, and there's so many Matts on BookTube. There's so many. Me, Matt, Fantasy Book Reviews, Matt on Books. There's a million others. I promise that I can't think of right now that I've heard of.
There are a lot of
Um,
Matts, a lot of you guys out there.
Yeah, but I have to say, Matt on Books brings that authentic feel. I don't know really how to put it more than that. Like
Yes.
if he loves a book, he talks about what he loves. But if he doesn't like a book, it's like you're gonna hear why too. And it's kind. It's not in a way that's like disrespectful or anything. So I love both of their channels. Wonderful answers.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I guess just lastly, I would love and I just wanted to thank you for coming to hang out on my channel for a little bit. Let me borrow you. I know you're busy, so getting a little bit of your intellect and your inspirations and that has just been so much fun. So I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we got to have this talk, and you've been just a lovely host, and it's been a lot of fun. And thank you to everyone in the chat who showed up. It means a lot.
Yes. Yes, well, of course. And thank you guys for in the chat. Y'all are so wonderful. It makes it such like a hospitable feeling. You guys bring the kindness over in the chat. I truly appreciate it. Anybody who watches this in the future, of course, thank you so much as well. And so I have to say the YouTube stuff, like, share, subscribe. That always helps, right? And tomorrow, let's see who I talk with.
Gotta check
I'm
out the
so
schedule.
bad at this. I say it every time and I never get any better at it. Let's see here. I'm so bad at this. I could probably like like prepare for an
I could
hour
look
and a
on your
half.
channel and see.
Yeah. So I just remembered I haven't put up my new schedule. So stay tuned on my Twitter because I will put it up as soon as I'm done with this chat. But hey, again, Johanna, thank you so much for coming on the channel. Thank you guys for watching live, and for you guys that will watch in the future, thank you so much as well. We will see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Thanks.